Wow, what a large group. First of all, thank you to the Mid-Ohio Valley chapter of SHRM for inviting me to be here today. I've had a lovely flurry of emails with Jenny back and forth. One of the last emails I was just looking at, it said, yeah, we usually have 5 to 10 people at our meetings. It's a little bigger when we go to Marietta. By the way, thanks for all coming out because you heard I was going to be here. You are truly wonderful. It is true. HR profession, I don't have to tell you, it's a difficult world. You walk in a lot of different, very thin lines. You're dealing with high-intensity moments sometimes as you're applying policies that people might or may not be real happy about. You're having difficult conversations on a variety of things. So it's tough to be an HR professional. And I say that as someone who is not an HR professional, but has dealt with my share of HR professionals in my life. So I am not coming here as an authority on HR. I'm coming here as an authority on some other stuff, which I think will help you along that path. My first question to all of you folks in the back of the room, can you hear me all right? Awesome. I have a microphone. I bring the microphone because I never know what kind of space I'm going to walk into. But I've also been told that every meeting I've ever spoke at to be quieter, so I don't think I have a problem. But I always check and I ask, and if for some reason you get a little lost, just put your hand to your ear and I'll know to turn my microphone on. It's off for the moment. I'm going to start with a story. So, imagine an HR professional, hopefully not you. Imagine an HR professional. Perhaps you've been in this situation. Boss comes into the office moments before a quarterly meeting, maybe a day, and says, oh, we need to roll out this new policy. I doubt it matters what the policy is, but you've probably had this conversation. And he says, and you're going to bring it up at that meeting. So have at it, do what you do, make it happen, make everybody happy, right? So what do? Well, you go to your computer and you start figuring out how this policy is going to impact people, what they need to know, all of that information, because you have to talk intelligently at that meeting. And you have to set people's minds at ease. And you craft this beautiful message. You spend your time on it. You think you've got all the details that you need. Everything's in its place. You've explained everything. And then you get to the meeting. And as you start talking, things seem to be going well. You're getting some nods, a little bristles. It's to be expected. It's new policy. And then it happens. Somebody fires a question at you that you're not prepared for. And immediately, the attention, the blood boils, you're starting to get edgy. You're trying to answer the question, so you throw more information at them. Or you get defensive. And the more questions come, the more you retreat, the more you get nervous. Finally, you get through this whatever minute presentation. It probably felt like you were up there for a day and a half. In reality, you were probably up there for 5 minutes, right? And you get all that. Then you get back to your computer, and then it hits. Email after email, questions. You've got emails from the folks you presented the policy to, asking all sorts of questions that you thought you answered in that presentation. You've got questions from the higher up, from the boss, asking you, why are people so upset or whatever they are about this? So you're all in that space, and you don't know what to do next. Have you heard of someone going through a situation similar to that? Does that ring any bells for anybody? Perhaps it might. So my presentation today is going to talk about some stuff involved with that story. Society for Human Resource Management has a whole bunch of principles that they go by, especially for their professional development stuff. I think there's 7 or 8. I won't quote. But there's 3 that sit for me. 3. One is professional competency. Stuff that happens through SHRM is supposed to help you get better at what you do, right? Secondly, ethical leadership. As your role in HR, you are leading people in one facet or another, and we need to approach that from an ethical standpoint. And lastly, continuous learning. Hopefully, let's face it, HR policies change as the wind blows, right? What you're teaching, which I heard somebody talking earlier when we were getting settled, that said, well, we don't have to do this thing anymore, but the next time the administration changes, we're probably going to have to do that again, so we may as well just keep doing it. So apparently things shift quickly. The same thing happens in education all the time. What I'm going to talk about today sits neatly in between all three of those spaces. And it's called executive presence. Now, on the table in front of you, you have a stack of papers and a color-coded pen or pencil. I'm going to tell you that the staple packet, ignore for right now. Now, I was in education for 20 years, and I realized that by putting a packet of information in front of you, I have encouraged you to look at that packet instead of paying attention to me. I'm going to ask you to ignore all of that human nature within you and leave that packet face down for now. We'll talk about it later. You also have a note sheet. And then you have a little colored index card. Ignore the colorful index card for now. That's at the end. The pencil is yours to use or take. Again, as an educator, I realize that your students do not always come prepared to class, so I plan ahead. So that's for you. So taking the piece of paper, I want you to do something. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to do this. Okay? I want you to think about, maybe it's a couple days from now, maybe it's 30 days from now. As an HR professional, you're probably going to have to give a presentation to some team, whether it's 5 or 6 people, whether it's a whole department, whether it's a whole organization. You're going to have to talk to them about something new that they need to know HR related. Okay? Think about that moment. And if you're not 100% sure, make one up. You've probably had to do it before. Over the next 5 minutes, I want you, on the piece of paper, to craft the message that you would give to the group. Word for word. Write yourself a script. Maybe it's a new HR policy. If you want to make up a new HR policy, have at. The world is your oyster right now. But I want you to craft a message that you would deliver to a team, to a group of folks, however you want to position that. All right? Take 5 minutes and start writing while eating. I accept that you're also eating. I heard that. And I totally approve. But you still have to write it down, because we're going to do something with it later. ChatGPT, that's all of a sudden in the quiet I hear, write me a 3 to 5 minute presentation talking about it. I will own my own things. I completely forgot to send Jenny an introduction for me today. So as I am driving down 77, hey Google, open ChatGPT. Yeah, pull up that file. Could you write me a short introduction that talks about what I'm talking about? Totally did that, and then I clicked copy and I sent it to Jenny.
Nice.
I'm a firm believer that AI can be a time saver. And this is coming from education, where I had my students using AI as a time saver, as in not doing my assignments and just handing in a ChatGPT assignment. And be very careful as you're doing this. Make sure it's exactly what you would. So think about what you would say, not in an email that you would carefully send out. Think of this as something you would speak to a group of folks. I'm sure that even in this digital world, that occasionally you do have to speak to the people you work with. Maybe once in a while. Another 2 minutes or so. Tim, giving you skill practice here. Written language.
Yeah. I'm doing that this year.
If I really wanted to make it complicated, I'd ask you to write in cursive. But I've seen my cursive. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. I had a doctor's handwriting long before university awarded me a degree. Another minute or so. But I won't be saying pens down at the end of it. You're welcome to keep writing and start talking here. I'm going to move on. If you need to keep writing, feel free. I will not take offense at it. Also, there should be, on the back side of that, if you want to take notes on anything I'm saying, that's the back side is for. Feel free to write what you need to. When I was working on my PhD at Penn State, I got very interested in the concept of identity, understanding who we are. Now, I was doing it from the lens of working with music teacher education students. I was trying to figure out why music education students didn't know how to be teachers, even though they spent 4 years getting a teaching degree. That was my world. But in that space, I became very interested in identity. And identity is important for everything that we do. Identity is a huge impact on who we are at work, on who we are at home, on so many different spaces. And as I delved further into identity, I came upon this idea in the literature, this concept called executive presence. Now, you can do a Google search, and you'll find executive presence all over the place. ChatGPT loves this phrase, executive presence. A lot of people think that executive presence is a thing you either have or you don't. You've all been sitting in meetings where some person, leader of some sort, is standing up in front of you and you think, wow, they have a really good presence as they're speaking to you. Just because their leadership does not make them executive presence. Executive presence is this idea of being confident and comfortable in what you're talking about. I don't think of executive presence as a thing you have or you don't. I think of it as a skill set. Something you can develop. Okay? And for me, there are 5 parts to executive presence. The first is clarity. How clear is whatever you're trying to bring across to the people listening? And we'll talk about this in more detail, but that's the overall. So the first is clarity. The second is composure. Composure is that piece of executive presence that says when things become a little challenging, how do you handle yourself? Some of us can speak a message just fine. But the minute someone starts to challenge us in any way, we lose the message in some way because we're not prepared for that challenge point. I would imagine in the HR world there are many moments where you get challenged on stuff that you say to others. And it's in that moment that composure makes a big difference. The third is credibility. And credibility stems from a lot of different things. It really boils down to, can you be trusted to do what you say you're going to do? The fourth is connection. Part of executive presence is the ability to connect with whomever you're leading, whether it's a team, whether it's a division, whether it's a whole company. It doesn't matter. You have to, leadership and executive presence fails if we don't connect with the people with us. Think about those times when you've been in meetings or in presentations where the presenter felt completely disconnected from what was going on and what they were talking about. It's hard to stay engaged in that space. And the last is confidence. So these are the 5 C's of executive presence. These are the 5 things that I talk about when I talk about developing executive presence, which weaves into any moment when you have to be in a leadership role. And hopefully we're teaching not just the executives to be leaders, but everyone to be leaders. We want folks on the team, on different teams, to take leadership roles, even if it's not official. So that's where executive presence sits. Now, I'm not going to talk to you about all 5 parts of executive presence because we simply don't have time. I'm going to boil it down. We're going to talk about the 5, we're going to talk about, hey, look at that, I didn't click and it didn't happen. All right, we're going to talk about these 3. Clarity, composure, and credibility. If you can get these started, I think the other 2 are easier to pull in after that. And the last one, confidence, is a marriage of all of them. So let's break it down. Today's agenda, here's what's going to happen. The next 10 or 15 minutes is going to be an information dump. I'm going to give you lots of little tidbits of information. Once we get through that, then you're going to do a little bit of a partner activity. And if we have time, we might do a little one-on-one coaching, depending on who's feeling up for it. If we have time for that, we'll see where we get to. All right, here's the information dump. Clarity. Is what you're saying or typing, because when I say speaking, it's anytime you share information, whether it's through an email, through a conversation, doesn't matter. Clarity is how clear that message is to the person who's receiving it. There are 3 parts to clarity. The first is internal clarity. Internal clarity is, do you know what you're trying to communicate to the other person? And let's face it, sometimes we don't. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand or out yourself in any way here, but you've probably been given a message from leadership that you have to transmit that you don't completely understand. I see head nods. I've been there too. The problem with that is that if you don't fully understand it, you can't hope to make it clear for the people around you. So that's step 1. We have to make sure that we have internal clarity, or as much as we can. The second is message clarity. Message clarity is what you are speaking or writing or whichever. How clear is what you're giving to these folks? And the third is situational clarity. Situational is understanding the context in which you are sharing. If you are sharing a message with one group of people, you might share it differently to another group of people. Situational clarity is understanding that context. When you are crafting your messages, you have to make sure that you understand all 3. Now, when clarity becomes fuzzy, and yes, it's fuzzy on purpose. I did not just get a really bad ChatGPT guy, although it's happened. When the clarity becomes less so, becomes blurry, one of the things that we're tempted to do is to just add more information in the hopes it'll make more sense. I am super guilty of this. I remember back to the first presentation I gave at a conference for college students. I was doing a presentation called 10 Things They Didn't Tell You in College. It was a 1-hour presentation. I stood up, I thought I had my message, I got nervous, and I started talking. And it was off to the races. 45 minutes later, and somewhere around 10,000 words later, I looked at my audience. I think somebody passed out. It was rough. But that was the challenge, is that when we aren't clear on what we're saying, we think throwing more words at the problem fixes it. It doesn't usually. 9 times out of 10, it makes it worse. So we have to be careful with that. The second is we think, well, if I just say it again and again, and a third time, and a fourth time. They'll get it eventually. Sometimes we do this with children, except we add saying it slower. Pick up your toys. Pick up your toys. Pick up your toys. Right? We've all tried that. We think that just repetition will fix it. It doesn't. It absolutely doesn't.
If you say, and I mean it right now.
Also doesn't help, but my kids have always ignored that. Sure you do, Dad. Uh-huh. Oh, wait, that's when they're 24. Never mind, maybe it works when they're little. All right, so that's clarity. Now, I have for you, now you can flip over the stapled packet. Look at that, I told you I'd let you look at it. All right, this is the first page. This is the fine-tuned message funnel. Okay, now, we're not going to do this just yet, but you are. So, you write down your initial message, now no matter how long. Then you look at that message, and then you try and say it. If you've got more than 5 to 7 sentences, try to boil it down to 5 to 7 sentences. Then do it again. The goal is, what is your message in one line? Now, this is not necessarily what you present to the group, but you need to be able to know what your message is quickly and succinctly. Right? Because if you don't know the one-line summary of your message, you have no hope of explaining it to your audience, even if it requires more words later. So this is an exercise for you to do. Not that you give to them, but that you become clearer on your message. So again, I offer that as a worksheet thing. You can use it. You can send it up to someone you know. This will be available at the end as a digital thing. I will be offering this as a digital download. I offer that. But think about that as you're talking about your message. This is what we talk about with clarity. If you can say it in one sentence, you understand what you're talking about. So think about that. All right, let's talk about composure. What is composure? Some people think that composure is being calm all the time. Not really. Composure is being in control of your own emotional regulation. Meaning, when stuff happens, you don't let it change the nature of what you're talking about. And that's the key to composure. When you are giving a message, you need to make sure that you don't let the little things, and it doesn't have to be challenges. It can be interruptions. How many times have you been giving a message to a group of people and someone interrupts what you're talking about, whether it's a subordinate or it's leadership, right in the middle of what you're trying to say, they interrupt you. Composure is being able to keep going even though those things happen. Now, it's also you're suggesting, you're informing folks of a new policy, and all of a sudden hands are going up and they are challenging you on what you're saying. I'm sure that has never happened to anyone in this room. But they're challenging you on what you're saying. Composure is also not letting that become defensive. And the way we see composure break down, first of all, we think that if we get through the message faster, there'll be less argument. So we say that message as fast as possible and get off the stage. We click and send the email on Friday at 4:59 p.m. and then run for the door. That's not composure, that's hiding. All right? Secondly, you feel like you need to start defending yourself. So when people challenge you, it's not about the information. You take it as a personal thing, and you feel like you need to defend your honor. So you don your knightly armor and take out your sword and defend it, right? No, you can't do that. We also tend to raise our volume. When we are losing our emotional regulation, when our composure, we speak louder, right? We speak more forcefully. We sweat. We get nervous. We pace. I just pace normally. Right? All of those things are keys that our composure is breaking down in some way. So I've offered. Now here's the thing about, this is page 2 of your packet. Here's the thing about composure. Composure is not something you can usually fix in the moment. Composure is something you kind of have to practice. It's very ineffective to try and fix composure when people are challenging you. So what you'll notice about that packet on the front page of that second page, it's thinking about moments when you will have challenges to your composure. Sometimes they say the best offense is a good defense, right? Well, that's what this is. What are the situations? Think right now. Think about your daily work. Where are the moments where you feel most likely to lose your composure? Most of us have a person that if they walk into our office like, "Grr." It's okay, we all have those people. Composure, practicing, is knowing that that's coming and having systems in place. That's the second part of it. Once you identify, then you identify things that you can do to fix that. On the back side of that same sheet, the second page is double-sided. On the back side, DIR, disengage, intercept, and re-engage. Interrupt and re-engage. Disengage means when you feel that composure moment, you have to take a moment to disengage. Sometimes you have to pull back from the situation. It's because you're not solving anything. So it's knowing that sometimes you have to. Now, disengage can be momentary. If you're responding to an email, it's standing up from your desk and just going, and then coming back. Interrupt means stop the cycle. Re-engage, come back to it with a fresh eye. Okay, so that's what this second page, pressure pattern audit. So keep that in mind. All right. Our third, credibility. Credibility is built up in a lifetime and lost in an instant. Right? You've all been there. I know I have. I've had administrators that one action. No, I'm done. I can't trust them anymore. Credibility is that you do what you say and you say what you do. It's reliability over time. It's that you honor your commitments. It's things as simple as, here's this new policy. I'm going to follow up with you in a week to see if you have any questions. And then a week goes by and no follow-up happens. Because life happens. Things get in the way. But that's when credibility breaks down. That's those moments. And that's what we need to work on for executive presence, is that every time we say we're going to do something, it happens, right? It's also unraveled. I talked about a minute or two ago when we have that difficult message. We send it at 4:59 and then we run out the door in the hopes that no one catches us before we leave. That avoidance also, over time, can warp our credibility. Well, they're going to send us that. We're going to hear about that at the last minute, and we're not going to have any chance to follow up with it, right? We have to be careful. Now, I'm not saying that any of you do that here, but I know that when I was directing, oddly enough, I was directing musicals in my high school days. I knew that I always posted the cast list on Friday at 9 p.m. And then I turned off my phone. And I took my email off my phone. And I avoided the school for 2 full days. Because I knew. And the kids got used to that. So they got really good at showing up right when I was posting the list. Kind of smart that way. But that's that same credibility concept. And on this one, this is your third page. Hot versus cold. This is a diagnostic. Now, on the left side is the hot versus cold. You all encountered teammates, leaders, subordinates, pick a person. That is the hot versus cold side. Read through those. You may even get a human being, past or present, in your head that fits under that particular category. And that hot and cold person, that's the one, no credibility there, because you can't predict how they're going to react in any situation. The other side is consistent. And they're just the opposite of the hot and cold side. You've also, hopefully, I sincerely hope that you've worked with leaders, subordinates that were on the consistent side, that you knew every time what they said. You may not agree with them. One of my best leaders, I disagreed with 80% of the time, but I knew exactly where she stood every time we had a disagreement because she was consistent. I respected her. I didn't agree, but I respected her. And that's the credibility side of it. The bottom 3 questions are for you to think about yourself. When are there moments that maybe you haven't come up to the mark? Are there places for you to grow? And that's the hot versus cold versus consistent. So think about that. All right. That is the end of the information dump. All right. Now we're going to put this into a little bit of an application. I want you to take out. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to workshop real HR messaging. You're going to find a partner, and you're going to partner, and then you're going to critique each other. So what I want you to do right now is to take out the message I had you write at the beginning. Take out the message you wrote at the start of the presentation. The last time I gave this presentation, I had them write the message right now after I did the information dump. Everybody figured out where I was going, so they all wrote one-line messages. And they're like, ha, we figured you out. That's why I had you write it before I started speaking. All right. So here's what I want you to do. You're going to read over your sentence. You're going to read over your paragraph. And I want you to write that same message in one sentence. Some of you, if you only wrote 3 or 4 lines, that might be easy. If you filled the page with text, you might have to work a little harder. But go ahead, right now, write that same message in one sentence. This is what is the overarching idea you're trying to bring forth in that whole message that you wrote. And no, writing it in one sentence doesn't mean take your original message and remove all the punctuation so that it's just one sentence. So remember, that one sentence is for you so that you know exactly what you were trying to communicate. Now let's talk about the message that goes out to others. So here's what I want you to do. You're going to get 3 sentences you can write. 3. The first one is the headline. It's probably related. So this is the one sentence that tells whomever you're sharing it with, whether verbally or written, it tells them this is the thing in one sentence, right? This is what I'm trying to communicate to you. That's one sentence. Sentence 2 is, here's why it matters. And sentence 3 is, here's what I need you to do with it. 3 sentences. 3 sentences. Yes?
You said the headline, why it matters, and what happens next. How many sentences are
1 sentence for each.
For each, okay.
Yes, 1 sentence. So 3 sentences total. Got it. This is going to come closer to what you're going to share out. The first 1 sentence summary was just so you understood what we were talking about. All right. Now, as you've got that 3 sentence, I want you, as you're thinking about how you present this, we're going to add some composure as we're doing this. I want you to add at least one of the following, probably only one. Either add a steadying line, meaning like something like, I want to be clear and fair, what this means. Or perhaps acknowledgement, I know this may raise some questions. You can add that as a line or a boundary. Here's what I can share today and here's what comes next. Because let's face it, sometimes when you're sharing out a policy, you can't tell them everything yet because A, you don't know, B, they don't need to know yet. There's boundaries on it. So add one of those three, either a steady line, an acknowledgement, or a boundary to what you're sharing. So you've got your headline, what they need, headline, you've got your headline, why it matters, and what they need to do. Now you're going to add some sort of piece that either steadies them, acknowledges the challenge of what you're sending to them, or gives them boundaries around that. And then finally, now we're going to talk about the credibility piece. I want you to add one of the following to this message. Either a timeline, so by next Friday you'll receive XYZ, something like that, something that involved with that message. Or a follow-through commitment, meaning at the end of the message you say something like, if anything changes, you will hear from me by, so they know what to expect from you, or a next touch point. I'm going to check in with you on blank to see if you have questions, however you want to do that. However it applies to your message. So add some sort of thing that locks in your credibility. So timeline, touch point, or follow through. And it is possible that you were already thinking all of these wonderful things and you had all of this in your original message, so that where you are right now is where you were on the page before. But it is another way to think about how we craft our messages when we're trying to get information across to the folks that need it. So there's conveniently an even number of you. So just pick a partner, person on your left, however you want to do that. And what you're going to do, each person, and this is the think, pair, share thing. 20 years of education does not go away quickly or quietly. Think, pair, share. I want you, each person is going to share their original message and after we thought about those other moments. What I want the listener to do is, what was the headline? What was the one-sentence summary? So you're going to hear someone else's original and reworded, and you're going to try and come up with what headline was. And were there places that felt steady or more composed? And what was the follow-through? What was the credibility that I heard? Those are the three things the listener. You're going to get 2 minutes to share one way and 2 minutes to share the other way. So figure out who's partner A, partner B. Partner A shares first.
What was this?
Hi.
So it's for clarity, what was the headline? Number 2 is the message. this is a pretty truncated process. I've asked you to go through a lot of things in a very short amount of time. All of these, the conversations that you're having, the thoughts that we're going through with clarity, composure, and credibility, all of these pieces build together to help you craft stronger messages. Now, I accept there's 20 of you here. You're all on a continuum of how much this made sense, helped, and that's the beautiful part of all of this. But the most important piece is the deliberateness of thought that goes with it, is taking the time to make sure your message is clear. Taking the time to prepare yourself and prepare the message so that your composure stays as you are delivering and handling the questions that come afterwards. Because inevitably, there are going to be questions. And then the credibility is making sure that as you are sharing this information, you are always maintaining your credibility. Because the moment that you lose credibility, you lose the respect of the folks around you. So all of these pieces walk together to build that up. At this point, understanding and honoring deadlines, I said I would speak for an hour. We started early and I had an hour. So I offer you the opportunity to ask me questions and then I'll wrap up. It's totally okay to not have questions. But it's that hardest part of the presentation where you stand there and go, awkward. Yeah. Should I tap dance now? Maybe that'll bring in the question. Yes.
I have a question.
Absolutely.
So what's your secret sauce for being able to put something out there to someone that they don't want to hear? But, so how do you use, I'm going to be very stoic about it? Are you humorous? Are you excited? So just you as an individual? Me individually? Mm-hmm. I float. And part of it is knowing the audience. Sometimes my natural setting is comedian. I'm not funny, but I think I am, so I try that. But depending on the message, it does sometimes stoic works as well. The reality, and that's part of the situational context, it's understanding who you're talking to. I am a firm believer personally that even with difficult messages, I don't want to be stoic unless I absolutely have to be, because stoic adds an extra character to it that I don't always like, but that's not my personality. And some people, when I'm stoic, find me to be inauthentic. And that can also be a challenge, and that's the identity piece of this, is that when you deliver the message in such a way that is not you, that reads as well, and it reads in credibility. That's where that reads, is when, so whether it should be stoic or comedic or gentle or pick a descriptor, really partly has to fall into who you are. I can be stoic, but it's not real believable. Sorry, I had a moment there. But that would be my thought, and that's in the internal clarity. That's understanding who you are and how you need to show up in that space. And it won't always work every time, but that's where the composure piece of thinking about it ahead of time and taking that space to understand where you need to be in that will help with that. Yes?
I wonder if you have some leaders that you work with and you're having difficult conversations with somebody and they are emotional. What is the best way to have them tone that down?
Sure.
To change the environment.
Sure, to change the environment. My personal preference is to disengage for a moment. Is to find a space. We're really heated right now. We need to have this conversation, but we need to step back from this for just a moment. Whether it's you can walk away out of the room for 15 seconds just to reset. And that's a challenge, because if we don't, when folks are emotional, even if you're not emotional and the other side is emotional, if they don't disengage, if you don't find a way to break that tension out, they're just going to keep escalating and escalating and escalating. So it's having a battery, and I use this with with my students and the folks that I coach. It's having an arsenal of things to break that tension, to disengage for a moment. And that's part of knowing the people you're working with. What works to disengage one human isn't going to work to disengage another, and you have to know them and yourself well enough to know when that barrier has to happen. But that's the thing that we forget most of the time, is that as we emotionally charge, we don't disengage, and we have to find a way, even if it's for a split second, to pull back. And that's the strongest thing I can suggest, is that disengage piece, and having a battery to it. All right? So, reminder. The 3 C's that we talked about today: clarity, composure, and credibility. Again, we also have the other 2, which is connectedness and confidence. That's part of a larger conversation. Now, some of you use the colored cards for other things, and that's totally okay. But I'm going to give you something to do with the colorful card now, something specific. So, I've given you a ton of information. I've given you a couple of worksheets. I've given you some concepts and things to think about. Here's what I want you to do. All of this information, and any information we receive, is meaningless if we don't do something with it. Lord knows I've been to enough trainings and presentations and things where it's come in and gone out as soon as my feet hit the door. So I challenge you to do something. For the next 30 days, pull something either from clarity or composure or credibility. One idea, whether it's the 1-sentence spunk, whether it's the have a plan before you go in to maintain composure, whatever it is. Pick one thing and write it. For the next 30 days, I'm going to try and write clearer messages by using the 1-line summary. Come up with something, put it at the top of your colorful card, or if your card is full of other notes, put it on one of the other sheets. All right? So pick a thing. In the next 30 days, I'm gonna whatever. Then, you're gonna answer 4 questions. It's one thing to say that I'm gonna do something. It's a very different thing to have a plan for. So question 1 is, where will I use this technique? If it's the disengage technique, I will use it the next time whenever I have difficulty come up with something. When will you use it? Number 2 is, what will trigger it? What is the thing that is most likely to make me need to use this technique? The third thing is, how will I remember to use it? Am I going to have a sticky note on my computer? Is there going to be a calendar remind? Am I going to... However you remember things most effectively. I put tasks on my phone. That's how I keep track of things. I have a task list on the front of my phone when I open it every day. So, and then lastly, how will I be accountable? So whether it's you're going to do a self-check at the end of the week and say, okay, I said I was going to do this thing, how did I do this week? Or an accountability partner. Is there someone that you can say, I'm trying a new thing, can you help keep me honest? That's what my wife is for whenever I decide I'm going to try and lose weight again. She's my accountability partner. We've all, so who's going to be accountable? Or a trusted observer, so someone who can just watch and give you feedback. Maybe if you're doing a thing related to meetings, you could say, hey, can you just keep an eye on me in this meeting and tell me how I did with X? But the point being is, how are you going to be accountable? So, what are you going to do? Where are you going to use it? How is it triggered? How will you remember to use it? And how will you get accountable? All of those pieces. Okay. That card is for you. And there's a QR code on the back of the card. The QR code on the back of the card is just something that intrigued you about this you want to learn more about. That's to ask me questions. All right. If you want the slides from this and the digital downloads, then all you have to do is scan that QR code. There's a brief survey. You can answer as much or as little of it as you want. But by filling out that survey, you get these slides and digital copies of the pieces that I handed you. Remember, don't stand in front of the QR code. And then, I'll wait. Magic of QR codes is waiting until all the phones hit the ground. Okay. And then lastly, that's just if you need to contact me. This is my website, this is my LinkedIn, and that's just to send me an email. Thank you again so much for SHRM for offering to let me come and talk to your wonderful group. I hope you all enjoyed lunch. I know I enjoyed mine. Again, I'm going to be, if you have additional questions for me, I'm going to be standing in the back of the room till the end of the gathering. All right? Thank you so much.